Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share scary Wendigo horror stories. First story, Wendigo psychosis. It is really easy to lose yourself up here. The thought comforts me somewhat, although I'm not sure why, as the commonness of my situation does nothing to change the exigency of it. I suppose it is my fault. I knew the four-wheeler was low on gas when I left the cabin, and I would only have just enough to reach the lake house, but I couldn't help myself when I saw a path I hadn't been down before. It snaked away into the woods. The fallen leaves that covered it reflected the sun's golden light, making it look like some sort of yellow brick road. The temptation of new discovery outweighed any fuel concerns I had, and so I revved the engine and plunged deeper into the woods than I had ever been before. The trail itself was simply amazing. The foliage burst with a colorful radiance the likes of which I had never been privy to back in Connecticut. The crisp mountain air, which seemed ever abundant up here in Vermont, filled my lungs with an airiness that made me feel as if I could fly, and at times it seemed as if I was indeed flying as I whipped along those mountain trails. The trail itself was amazingly well kept, making it all too easy for me to forget myself and far exceed my normal self-imposed speed limit. The ground was clear aside from the leaves, and lacked even the occasional small branch or stone which normally litter trails such as these. There were a few times where a small stream carrying melt water down the side of the mountain crossed the trail, creating a small patch of mud and a few loose stones, however. Even those were few and far between. I was not sure exactly how long I had been on the trail for. I knew I had left the cabin at 9 a.m. However, since my watch had been broken the day before while piling wood and I was hesitant to bring my phone with me on the trails, I was unable to tell the time. A quick glance at the sky revealed the sun to be partly hidden by clouds. However, I was able to guess that it was around 12 o'clock when I ran out of gas. I had been zipping along the trails, and the serenity of the nature around me had caused my guard to lapse. And I had forgotten my worries about fuel. This, combined with my increased speed, is what led me to reach a sudden stuttering halt, as my vehicle sputtered, attempting to pull in whatever last remnants of fuel remained in the tank. My heart sank as I steered the four-wheeler to the side of the trail, stopping it amongst a bed of ferns directly next to a large maple tree, which stretched towards the sky with a stunning elegance that allowed me to, upon seeing it, momentarily forget my situation. My slight reprieve was short-lived, however, as I soon found myself fighting off panic as I glanced around, realizing that I had absolutely no clue where I was. The trees stretched on endlessly in every direction, and the trail that had seemed so set and certain while whizzing through it on the four-wheeler now appeared convoluted and confusing, as even a cursory glance over my shoulder revealed several offshoots and forks, among which any could have been the trail I had taken, as I had no idea. Knowing that panic would only cause me to make irrational decisions that could potentially make my situation worse, I closed my eyes and took several deep breaths, attempting to bring my heart rate down and stop my head from spinning. I did not waste my time with false reassurances, as I understood that I was not in a favorable situation. As I opened my eyes, I decided to make a quick accounting of the facts of my predicament in my head. I was in the mountain country of Vermont, which had in recent years become prime bear country. Up here in the mountains in mid-October, the temperature would plummet at night, going from 65 degrees in the sun during the day to well below freezing at night. The cabin where I had been staying was one of the last reaches of civilization in the area. It was on the outskirts of the small town of Chittenden, Vermont, and the property backed up to a massive area of national forest, which is where I now found myself. 10 years ago, these woods would have had hunters and four-wheelers all throughout. However, in recent years, as the families around here had aged and died, and their children had moved off into the city, the woods had retaken most of the trails, and the family cabin was one of the last such outposts of humanity that was still inhabited this far away from Rutland, which was the biggest city in the local area. With these facts in mind, I realized that it would be in my best interest to get back to the cabin sooner rather than later, as being lost out there in the freezing cold with bears, and who knows what else stalking about, was not a tantalizing prospect to me. If I were to be attacked by any such beast, my only defense was my Swiss Army knife, which would probably do nothing more than anger any Bruin that would already have been incensed in order for it to make the decision to attack. As far as the cold, I had flint and steel in the pocket of my leather jacket. However, glancing around, I realized that I would be hard-pressed to find wood dry enough to burn due to the saturation caused by the severe rainstorm that had swept the area for the past few days, only stopping earlier that morning. This all combined to create a feeling of dread that sat in my stomach like a lead weight, emanating throughout my body in the form of a cold chill that made my bones ice. Realizing that sitting on the four-wheeler reflecting on my problems was doing little to actually solve them, I decided to head out. But where would I go? I did not know how far I had traveled, and although I believed that it had been about 3 hours since I had left, that was purely conjecture based on the placement of the sun in the sky. Despite this, I knew that I had been traveling quite fast along trails that often took turns and twists, and thus, even if I could find the right trail to take me back, it would certainly be much longer than the 5 hours that I had until sundown before I arrived at the cabin. Knowing this, I decided that the best course of action would be to determine the direction that I needed to head in, find my bearing using the sun, and run, making use of my cross-country experience to hopefully get me back before the sun set, and with it my best navigational tool. I knew that any direction that I headed in would allow me to reach an identifiable landmark. The National Forest land covered the top of the mountain. The area's western border was a massive Chittenden reservoir, which supplied water to the city of Rutland and the surrounding areas. There were inhabited houses on the far side of the reservoir from where I stood, and our lake house sat amongst them. That was where I was supposed to be heading. I was going to spend the week there to give my parents some alone time at the cabin. However, that plan had been upended because the boat engine required to cross the reservoir sat on a now stalled four-wheeler, as it was the most expensive part of the boat, and thus not something that we left unattended for extended periods of time. The southern border was the pipe that brought the water from the reservoir and a subsequent access road that ran parallel to it, allowing for utility workers to service the pipes and ensure that they remained in good condition. This pipe ran about straight east to west before it intersected the eastern border, which was the mountain's lone actual road. By actual, I mean one that was paved and wide enough for a car to drive on, in most places that is. The road ran north to south, up one side of the mountain to the other. The road was paved at the bottoms and was traversable by car except for the portion on the top of the mountain, which had been badly damaged following a mudslide from one of the higher peaks. The mudslide had left a rather large creek that ran through a sizable indent in the land. This creek formed the northern boundary. The four boundaries together made up a massive area, several hundred square acres in size. Knowing this, I had only to decide which boundary I wanted to head for. The cabin itself was on the eastern road, about halfway up the mountain. This, however, did not mean that that was the best choice to head for. If I failed to reach the road before sundown, then I would be stuck wandering in the woods at night. However, if I could reach one of the other boundaries sooner, then although it would certainly take me until after dark to get back, I would at least be walking along marked trails. After pondering my precarious situation further, I decided that trail or no trail, I did not want to be walking through these freezing woods at night, and as such I decided to go for broke and head east towards the road. After using the sun to determine which way east was, I started running. It was somewhat eerie running through the middle of the forest alone, especially since it had seemed to go so quiet after the storm earlier. But I didn't mind. I enjoyed nature, and I was more afraid of nighttime's freezing temperatures than of the actual creatures in the woods. Still, I couldn't help but feel a chill of fear creep up my spine whenever I saw movement out of the corner of my eyes. It happened rather often, just a fleeting glimpse of brown fur, dashing away before being hidden by the all-consuming underbrush. I suppose it should not have frightened me as much as it did, seeing as animals were naturally curious, however not typically prone to straying too far into someone's line of sight. I ran for a long time. However, darkness quickly began eating away at the edges of the golden daylight as the sun crept ever closer to the horizon. As the sunlight became increasingly feeble, I found myself forced to slow my pace in order to avoid tripping over something. I walked on even as the moon rose high in the sky and the temperature began to plummet. I could feel it even through my leather jacket, a stabbing coldness that made my bones rattle with body-racking bouts of shivers. Even though I was tired, I knew I couldn't stop, as my persistent walking was probably the only thing maintaining my body heat. And I had recently entered an area of woods which was thoroughly flooded, dashing any hopes I might have had to start a fire. The forest was incredibly dark, as it was lit only by the moon and stars, whose light had to fight its way down to me from the ever-thickening canopy above. It was because of this darkness that I began to stop seeing the shapes at the edges of my vision. However, this was not a reprieve from fear, for in the place of visual verification of their existence, I now had a quite chilling auditory one. I never actually heard them walking. There was no snapping of twigs or sloshing of mud. However, they stayed ever present, constantly just out of my eyesight, yet always there. I know they were there because of the noises. They ranged from a low, keening wail, like a hungry kit separated from its mother, to a low, guttural cough-like sound. When I first began hearing them, I took off running, tripping and falling on my face several times, cutting my elbow once. However, it soon became apparent that running away was not an option, as the faster I went, the faster the noises followed, growing louder as I picked up speed, until I was in a full-out sprint, my ears filled with a blood-curdling scream. Tears began to fill my eyes, as I didn't want to die, and it was because of these tears that I failed to see the embankment fast approaching until it was too late, and I had already stepped out into the abyss, hanging in the air like a rag doll for a moment before gravity clenched me in its grasp and thrust me down to the ground below. And just like that, the sounds were gone. As I lay there on the forest floor, some 30 feet below the ledge I had just jumped off of, I realized that the sound were indeed gone. Silence filled the air. However, even that did nothing but drive me further into frenzy, as the silence cut through my ears like razor blades, burning a hole in my brain with the sheer concept of nothingness, which is utterly too much for the human brain to comprehend. As I lay there, I began hyperventilating, just simply wanting it to all stop, and it did, with a cough. I once again heard the noise, echoing through the wood like a gunshot, and with it, sound returned. Although still less than could normally be expected, I began to hear the creatures of the woodland, which, it occurred to me, I hadn't heard since the four-wheeler had stalled out. As I hiked through the woods, I began to get hungry. I realized that I hadn't eaten since that morning, and running around the woods like an idiot was not a good way to manage my caloric use. Despite the growing pain in my side, there was nothing I could do about it except continue walking. I couldn't simply sit and wait for rescue, as I wasn't expected back at the cabin for around a week, and I did not want to try my hand seeing if I could play Bear Grylls and survive the week. I wanted to get home. The sun rose, and with it came the realization that I had been going in the completely wrong direction. Apparently, during my bout of crazy the night before, I had managed to get myself hopelessly and utterly lost. Sighing deeply, however, realizing there was nothing I could do about it, I adjusted my course and carried on, only to look up a couple of hours later to see that once again I had strayed, bewildered as to how this had happened to me in broad daylight. I nonetheless readjusted my course and carried on. This kept up for several days, during which time, despite my best efforts, I could just not seem to get my bearings. All this time, my hunger increased, growing into an intense burning pain in my stomach. I drank water from streams, but I could just not find food. As my hunger grew, so too did the presence of my friends. By my 6th day without food, my vision swam with brown matted fur, clumped with blood and hollow black eyes during the daytime, and my hearing shrieked with their voices at nighttime. I took to calling them my friends because they began talking to me. They told me of where I could find abundant food and feast until I was full. At first, I was repulsed. However, my aversion to the idea decreased as my hunger increased until I reached a point where I clung to their words, just awaiting the time when I could make them prophetic. My chance came on my 7th day. I was walking through the woods when I heard the rattle of human voices ahead of me. 2 voices, one male and one female. I heard nothing as I crept closer to the clearing where they sat. I peered around a large oak tree, grinning as I saw a young couple in their 20s. I crept around the side of the tree, clenching my knife in hand, and I snuck closer. The man didn't hear me until it was too late. My knife already plunged deep in his chest, and the woman's scream was cut short by my teeth meeting in her throat, severing her windpipe. I will not disgust you with the details of that night. However, I left that clearing satisfied in many ways, and with no trace that they had ever been there. I was able to find the path that they had come along and took it to the road that ran up the mountain. Upon reaching the road, I began the hike up, and within minutes, I stood at the driveway of the cabin. The sign on the mailbox read Judd's, and I grinned manically as I used my fingers to paint each letter a crimson red. Then, looking towards the cabin and confirming that both vehicles were there, I began to walk down the driveway, humming along to whatever tune it was my friends were signing. It was something ancient and in a tongue I couldn't understand, and yet I somehow knew the guttural ballad was about me. Walking slowly down the driveway, appreciating the beauty of the setting sun, I glanced quickly at the woodpile, and I couldn't help but smirk as I wondered if anyone was buried below it. As I approached the front door, it occurred to me that I needed a new name. David Judd just didn't seem to fit the new me. The antiquity of such a name failed to express the vast wisdom I now contained. Wisdom on the one true way to satiate hunger. As I pondered what my new name should be, I heard my friends once more, and, smiling more than I ever had before, I realized that they were once again right. The name was perfect, something about it just felt right. Thus, as I opened the door, I tightened my grip on my knife, licked the dried blood from my lips, and before stepping inside, whispered so low and so toneless that my voice could very well have been mistaken for the wind. I am Wendigo. Second story. Here be monsters. Does being human mean something more than being an animal? I've never known the answer to that question. What I do know is that humans came to be the dominant species on the planet not because they're the strongest, but because they're the smartest and most cruel. Homo sapiens butchered and enslaved, domesticated, everything in its path. Now we rule the roost. We seem to take our responsibilities a little more seriously these days. We try to save endangered species, but should every rare life form be saved? I don't know the answer to that question either, but I suspect I have a more informed view on it than most. I work as a tracker for a little-known government agency, DUIBU, the Department of Interior, Bureau of Unexplained. Ridiculous, right? I just work for them, complained to the marketing department about the name. DUIBU exists because some non-human life is so rare, so unusual, that it merits its own classification. Throughout history, people have called them monsters. At DUIBU, we prefer the term cryptid. I track them. Gone are the days when people would simply write "Here be monsters" on uncharted areas of a map. I have a history you would not like, military and big game hunting. Seems like we only call it game when we know we are going to win. The things I track now, that's not always a given. Let's face the elephant in the room straight away, shall we? You don't believe in monsters, do you? Do you believe in dinosaurs? It's something of a logic gap to accept that our planet could host 50-ton carnivorous lizards, but not a couple of cryptids. Trust me on this one, they are real. DUIBU have identified 17 cryptid species and 183 confirmed individual cryptids. I have the very unpleasant feeling that I may be close to confirming a boost to those numbers. I've been in Washington, D.C. for the last month investigating. There's been a spate of disappearances and unexplained deaths on the D.C. Metro around Anacostia Station. DUIBU classify them as cryptid-related deaths. There is something else going on here, though, something much scarier than some subway-dwelling monster. 13 individuals have disappeared in the last 4 months alone. We don't have details on every individual case, but the ones that do bear remarkable similarities. In each of the well-documented cases, the victim in question displayed several unusual behaviors prior to their disappearance, according to witness statements. They each exhibited signs of high anxiety, shaking, sweating, appearing distracted, and looking around as if hearing noises or looking over their shoulder. They all complained about light sensitivity and photophobia. This escalated rapidly from mild complaints to complete fear and aversion in a short space of time. Coupled with their anxiety, they each began to display signs of agitation around other people, manifesting in acute anthropophobia, a fear of humans. These symptoms developed rapidly, between 8 hours and as little as 20 minutes. In each case, the intensity of the symptoms peaked as the victim crossed under the Anacostia River between the Navy Yard Ballpark and Anacostia stations. The victims, in an extremely high state of discomfort and agitation, exited the train at Anacostia Station and leapt down to the tracks before running into the tunnel back in the direction of Navy Yard Ballpark Station. Presumably, this was a way of relieving the light sensitivity and getting away from the other people in the station. Civilian investigations into the main and service tunnels have found some disturbing evidence that has led to the involvement of Wendigo and a lockdown on news coverage. Tiny human bone splinters, indicative of violent snapping caused by a tremendous crushing force, have been found in multiple locations. The blunt force trauma of a metro train smash could shatter bones in this way, but the patterns of the fragments' locations along with no reported rail collisions make this an unlikely explanation. Some unknown force is splintering the bones. More concerning is some of the other organic matter found. Droplets of a dark pink viscous fluid, thicker than blood, are present in multiple locations. It looks like a smoothie made from human internal organs. The smell is vile and acrid. It was tests on this organic soup that first identified the unique bacteria we have named Cryptotox infurus. Are you aware of toxoplasmosis? It's largely harmless in humans, a disease caused by a brain-altering parasite that thrives in both rats and cats. Toxoplasmosis has the most extraordinary effect. It really wants to live inside a cat. They present the perfect ecosystem for it to flourish. To ensure it gets to its perfect host, it alters the brain chemistry of any rat host and makes them attracted to, rather than repelled by, the scent of feline urine. The rats actively seek out the cats, and the predatory nature of the cat does the rest to ensure the toxoplasmosis parasite lives on and reproduces in the cat's guts. The parasite Wendigo found Cryptotox infurus is toxoplasmosis on steroids. The organic soup is swimming with this parasite and causing the unusual behavior in the victims. The potency of it is terrifying. The virulence of a parasite that can affect change in such a complex system as the human brain in such a short space of time is unprecedented, mind-blowing, and horrifying. Its genetic structure is so perfectly attuned to attack the human brain, it seems purpose-bred to do so. That can't be naturally possible. Nothing like this has ever been seen before, and for it to be so perfectly suited to the task should take thousands of years of evolution and development. Where has this perfectly engineered parasite come from? With toxoplasmosis, the cat is both beneficiary and victim of the parasite. It causes illness and can be fatal to its host. What if the host of this parasite isn't harmed by it? What if it's a predator's method for harvesting its prey? Predators have a lot of things in common. They are larger and stronger than their prey. They are adapted to kill in a number of ways. They have highly but narrowly focused senses to aid a tunnel vision chase. Many have a high but short burst speed. Most importantly of all, they have some form of killing tool, be that mechanical like teeth or claws, or something less prosaic, venom, or an entrapment mechanism like a brain-altering parasite. Predators maintain large territories, and out of necessity, territories teeming with prey. They favor isolated, concealed lairs, needing privacy and shelter for post-hunt recovery and to protect their vulnerable young through long gestation cycles. In our pre-technology existence, monsters lived in the dark places around our settlements, forests, mountains, and caves. They enjoyed the darkness and the isolation. Many of those places are gone now. It's so easy to generate light in the darkness, and few places are safe from the spread of man. These days, if you're an apex predator and your prey is humans, then the subway system of a city is the perfect place to live. By day, I've been scouring the miles of service tunnels in the metro network, looking for signs of this cryptid predator. By night, riding the subway between Navy Yard Ballpark and Anacostia, looking for the next parasite-infected victim. Last night, I got my wish. I shared a carriage with a large group, which I later learned were an extended family. One of the young men in the group, Aaron Woodley, 20 years of age, became highly agitated as we passed underneath the river. I saw the symptoms firsthand, the shaking, the sweating, the abject fear in his eyes as his friends and family tried to help him. On arrival at the station, Aaron excited the train. Several of the group also got off the train to try and help him. I followed and watched as he tore away from them with enormous ferocity, then jumped down onto the tracks. I jumped down after him, indicating to the group I was in law enforcement, and began pursuit. I was immediately plunged into a Stygian darkness accompanied by a deep silence as the thousands of tons of concrete, earth and water above and around us blocked out the rest of the world. I was unable to keep pace with my mark, wary of unseen obstacles. Eventually, ambient light from luminous service signs helped my eyes adjust, but I could no longer see him. He was either too far ahead or had branched off into a side tunnel. I took a moment to prepare myself and put on some night vision goggles for my rucksack. The tunnel came alive in shades of green and black. I unholstered my firearm as a precautionary measure and took a flashlight from my rucksack in case light was a better weapon than bullets should the need arise. After a moment, the silence lifted. I could hear a steady background drip, like the beating of a wet heart. Periodically, a humming, vibrating noise signaled a train movement somewhere on the vast sprawling metro network. With the night vision on, I could see my mark a few hundred yards ahead of me, still on the main track. I broke into a fast walk close the distance. After some distance, he went to the wall and disappeared from view. He must have gone into a service tunnel, but it was impossible to make out the detail from this distance. When I reached the point where he disappeared, I found an open door and followed behind him. The service tunnel was a stark contrast to the wide expanse of the main tunnel, only wide enough for a single person, and crowded on both sides, and overhead with pipes and machinery casing. This was an old tunnel, perhaps from the first stages of pre-construction of the Green Line back in the 1980s. Dotted along the tunnel were doors on either side. I checked each handle briefly as I passed. Some were locked, others open. I would glimpse and then lose sight of my mark as the tunnel kinked and twisted. He remained oblivious to my pursuit. I came to an open door on the right, skittering noises coming from inside the room. I saw Woodley, still as a statue looking up to the ceiling. Everything happened in a blur of movement. Woodley's head exploded in a spray of bone and gore. I caught glimpses of cruel hooked beak and spindly, spider-like legs. It was larger than a dog, but the sight of it was not what made me run. In a heartbeat after the ruin of Woodley's head, I released 5 rounds at the cryptid and turned on my flashlight in the hope the light would buy me time to escape. In that briefest instant before the glare of the flashlight rendered me blind through my night vision goggles, I could see its young already surging and crawling over the prostrate, headless corpse. Where there were dozens of tiny creatures, there were also hundreds of unhatched eggs. I ran. I debriefed by video call back in my hotel later that night. Captain Reed heard my account impassively, periodically interjecting questions to clarify elements of the story. He winced when I told him I had discharged rounds at the cryptid. "You did what?" "I considered the situation life-threatening, sir, and responded accordingly with lethal force. I said, "Did you hit it? Did you kill it? Please tell me you didn't kill the asset." I disengaged at pace and did not check the status of the cryptid. I replied, "Listen to me." He leaned forward. "It is the direct personal command of General Briggs that the asset remains unharmed and undisturbed. With all due respect, sir, this is a dangerous predator in a high-population civilian area. On its own, that merits action, but when considered in parallel with the effects of the parasite and—" He cut me dead. "I don't want your due respect, soldier. I want you to follow direct orders. The asset is to be monitored, and at the appropriate moment, we will extract some of the eggs to the Prendick facility for evaluation." The debrief concluded with an implementation of a full all-agency lockdown of information pertaining to the contact. The whole exchange left me to reflect that, whilst all cryptids are monsters, not all monsters are cryptids. I hope that by releasing this account, someone will take note. There is something terrible in our capital. It is a predator. It manipulates your brain and uses fear to isolate from your family and friends. It separates you from the herd and draws you into its darkness where it feeds on the vulnerable. It is growing in this darkness. We must not let it breed, multiply, and spread. Third story. Message from a Wendigo. I have been trapped here for too long. I can never forget the day I was taken. It was the dead of night. I had just killed my prey, a woman who had been foolish enough to wander into my home. I remember how happy I was that day, that I did not have to hunt. Instead, the food brought itself to me. If only I had known then that my delight would soon turn into terror. The men came into my home and overpowered me. There were 3 of them. They were large, much larger than the normal men I hunted. Perhaps in different circumstances, I would have killed and consumed them. But I was injured at the time. Not a grave injury, but it impeded me still. I had received the wound a week before from a particularly resilient man. He had beaten my foot with a rock, damaging my ankle, even as I straddled his chest, tearing his throat open. Looking back, I still find myself appreciating the man's sheer will. But I appreciated his flesh much more. Even without the injury, the men would have been difficult to conquer. As I said, they were large, but not only that. They were carrying strange metal poles. They were warriors of some kind. The poles fired darts that struck me and made me drowsy. The men threw me into a metal carriage that moved by means I knew not and still do not know. It was within this carriage I lost consciousness. I awoke I know not when in a metal cage. I was still in a slight daze. There were men all around, all just as large as the 3 who had attacked me. Initially, I was ecstatic. I was surrounded by food. I did not see any of the men who had taken me. These ones did not have any metal poles, so they were easy prey. But when I attempted to escape, I found myself unable to damage the cage in any way. I shrieked and roared and bashed at the cage. The men flinched in fear, and some pulled smaller metal objects from pouches at their hips. I drew myself to my full height, still towering above the men, despite them being larger than the ones I was accustomed to. I felt something hit me in my back, and I turned my head to see another dart had struck me. One of the men who had taken me had been behind me the whole time, on the other side of the cage, and he had fired another dart at me. Once again, I fell unconscious. When I awoke again, I was in a room. It was larger than the cage I had previously been, 10 paces wide and double across. But this one did not offer the commodity of being able to see out of it. The walls were hard stone, and the door a harder metal. I tried to break out for hours, but I could not. I laid upon the ground, only thinking of my hunger. I was utterly ravenous. Whether it was morning, noon, or night, I had no way of knowing. All I knew was how famished I was. Even if only one day had passed since I had last eaten, it still would have been one day too many without food. My capture was, regrettably, my fault and mine alone. I had grown complacent. I was situated in a location with much prey, and I stayed for too long. I have lived for hundreds of years, and I have hunted in many places. I have preyed upon men of every color and creed. I have always hidden my tracks and never stayed in one place for too long. But I was lulled into a false sense of security. My home, a deep cavern, was one I thought no man would find me in. I should have fled when that woman entered my home. If she could find her way in, of course warriors could. I cursed my foolishness, but I must look forward. The past cannot be undone. All of this happened a while ago. I can only estimate the length of time that has passed. I assume it to be a fortnight. One fortnight stuck in this prison. One fortnight too many. The men frequently take me from the room. They always do it the same way. A small part of the door is opened, and meat is thrown in. I devour it, for I am starving always. I am rendered comatose moments afterwards. They have poisoned the food. In the brief seconds before I am unconscious, I can see the door open and men enter. I always awake in the same room, but in a different position from where I fainted. I know the men are taking me somewhere and returning me. I know not where they are taking me, nor what they are doing to me. The only way to avoid this will be not to eat the meat, and that is no option at all. My hunger will not allow it. Sometimes, the men try to speak to me. I can speak their simple language, of course, but I say nothing to them. I have no interest in doing so. Most of the time, the men leave me be. Sometimes, if I roar and bellow and strike at the walls too much, 5 men will enter the room and hit me with darts. I have attempted to attack them, but their strength is shocking. I have grown weak since I arrived here. The men wrapped my injured foot in something. I am unsure of what it is or what nefarious purpose it serves. I live in fear. I fear man. Man, whom I have preyed upon since I was created by the Great Spirit. Man, who have feared me, and indeed feared all Wendigos, now have made me feel fear. I fear their metal poles. I fear their size. I do not know why these ones are so big. A different tribe, perhaps. I'm ashamed of myself for feeling this way. It is as if I am their pet. I often wonder where they get the meat from. It is man meat, without a doubt. They try to feed me other things, but I can only consume man meat. These men must kill and butcher their own kind to get it. Perhaps they consume other men as well. I shudder at the depravity of it. The thought of killing, or even worse, consuming my own kind, other Wendigos, makes me sick. I don't know what the people will do to me. I have heard a story of a Wendigo that was slaughtered by men. They chopped off his legs, then later cut him to small pieces. I imagine they will do something similar to me. Today, when I awoke, I found paper in my room. So, I write this message. I write it in my native tongue, which only Wendigos know, and is simply nonsensical gibberish to humans. I have no way of knowing where this message will go, but it is my only option. If any of my kind somehow finds this, please save me. I will forever be in your debt. Dr. K. Bowman. The preceding transcript was written by a man named Ned Terrell, Canadian, 2.05 m tall, 34 years old. Worked as a dentist. Him and his girlfriend went missing 3 months and 4 days ago and were presumed dead. Mr. Terrell lived a normal life prior to his disappearance. He received a proper education, was never abused, never had mental health issues, or any sort of violent behavior. All of his friends and family spoke of him quite highly until they were informed of his actions. Those who knew Mr. Terrell noted that he had always been quite fascinated with superstitions, legends, and mythological creatures. On multiple occasions, he would go on trips to attempt to find these supernatural beings. He has traveled to Scotland to look for the Loch Ness Monster, America to find several creatures including Bigfoot and Mothman, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore to find a Pontianak, as well as several other countries. His most recent interest was the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a Native American legend, but is quite well known in Canada as well. It is somewhat surprising that Mr. Terrell never went looking for the Wendigo earlier than he did. The stories behind the Wendigo vary quite a fair amount. It is typically said to be a spirit that possesses humans and drives them to cannibalism, but it's also said to be its own individual creature which consumes human beings. Some sources also say that humans who resort to cannibalism to survive turn into Wendigos. Wendigos, despite often being depicted as anthropomorphic deer-like creatures, are actually traditionally described as giant humanoids that smell extremely foul and can cause a chill, and in some iterations, a blizzard wherever they go. Mr. Terrell went looking for the Wendigo on April the 6th. He went with his girlfriend, Iris Hall, 31. They went to Ontario and explored deep into a forest that will remain unnamed. They informed their family and friends that they would be gone for at least a week, maybe a few days more. An extreme blizzard hit the area they were in, and their families were worried. After they still had not returned after 1 week and 5 days, they were reported as missing. After nearly a month of searching, they were not found and were declared dead. 2 weeks after this, it was noted that several children were reported missing from towns near the forest. 20 children in 4 days. They found the bodies of several of the missing children, partially consumed. The worst was a 6-year-old boy, who I won't name out of respect for him and his family. I saw the body, and while I won't go into detail, I will note that the damage was so severe it was presumed that a bear had attacked him. Wildlife control was called in to reduce the animal population of any predators in the area. Well, over 50 men were deployed and, over the course of the next couple of months, tranquilized and relocated dozens of wolves and bears. But the attacks never stopped or even slowed. While almost all the missing people were children, a very small number of adults also disappeared. 3 to be precise. 2 men, both aged 23, and 1 woman, aged 21. It is worth noting that all the adults who disappeared were extremely small in stature and could be mistaken for large children as opposed to adults. Finally, 3 wildlife control rangers happened across a cave with several bodies surrounding it. They entered. Upon entering, they found Mr. Terrell. He was standing over the remains of a young girl, who has since been identified. She was 12 and was out for a hike when she passed by the cave and was taken. She lived about 2 hours away from the cave. Once again, I will not reveal her name. Due to Mr. Terrell recording everything he and his girlfriend did on the trip with an action camera, we know exactly what happened. The camera was found in the same cave as Mr. Terrell, and there are several videos recovered. The severely decomposed body of Iris Hall was also found. The videos are as follows. Videos 1 to 13. All are simply videos of Terrell and Hall exploring the wilderness. They come across as very likable, good-natured, and simply looking for fun. They kiss a lot, laugh a lot, and really love one another. In videos 8, 9, and 12, they speak about marriage and children. Video 14. After about a week of exploring, Terrell and Hall are ready to head back to civilization. Unfortunately, one of the worst blizzards in history occurred on that day. It would last for several weeks. Weather reports cite the temperature as dropping to 33 degrees Celsius. They took shelter in a cave. They are still extremely upbeat and perfectly composed. They had camping equipment and still had enough supplies for another few days. They make a few jokes, set up a small camp slightly far away from the mouth of the cave, then turn the camera off. Video 15. A video of Terrell and Hall exploring the cave. It is quite large. Terrell mentions the Wendigo and says it might be in there with them. He says that the cannibalism aspect of the Wendigo is what disturbs him the most, and that the very thought of it makes him somewhat nauseous. Hall questions how a human could sink to such depths. The video cuts off abruptly for no reason, presumably a malfunction. Video 16. Another video of the duo exploring the cave. Iris suddenly slips and screams. Terrell rushes towards her. He carries her back to the camp. He pulls the camera off his head. It ends up face down in the dirt. The video lasts for several hours before turning off, presumably due to the camera running out of battery. Video 17. Terrell facing the camera. He is noticeably upset. He remarks that Hall's leg is severely injured, the blizzard's still going on, and their food is gone. He says he doesn't recall eating any, and Iris doesn't either. He stares blankly at something off-screen for several seconds, then turns the camera off. Video 18. A goodbye video from Terrell and a barely conscious Hall. Only the upper half of Hall can be seen, due to the lower half of her being covered by a blanket. It is impossible to know the extent of the injury she suffered from. Given how much blood is on the blanket, it can only be assumed it is very severe. The two genuinely think they're going to die. Video 19. Another video with Terrell facing the camera. He is scarily thin now. Skin like paper, sunken cheeks, blank expression. He says the blizzard has been going on for a long time and shows no signs of stopping. He remarks that he is starving to death. He talks about the Wendigo and mutters something under his breath. The word cannibalism is barely audible. Once again, he looks at something off camera. He turns the video off. Video 19 is the final video, but we can easily deduce what happens. Left with no choice, Mr. Terrell cannibalises Iris Hall. He has a psychotic breakdown. He cannot live with being a cannibal, and to save himself, convinces himself that he is not a cannibal, he is a Wendigo, and eating humans is simply something he must do. The blizzard ends approximately 6 hours after this. Terrell begins his murder spree. I would now like to cross-reference the story Mr. Terrell wrote with facts that actually occurred. The note was written in French, Mr. Terrell's first language. Firstly, he calls the people he killed men and women, despite them all being children. He also said that the men who took him were much larger than the ones he normally hunted. Of course, this is due to the former being adults. He may have done this to lessen his guilt. He hunted exclusively children due to how easy they are to capture. Upon finding Mr. Terrell, the Rangers panicked and tranquilized Mr. Terrell. Despite being injected with enough tranquilizer to kill an average male, he survived. They threw him into a truck meant for animals and immediately drove to the nearest police station. He was placed in a holding cell. When he awoke, he attacked the bars of the cell. One wildlife control ranger was still present to give a statement to the police. He still had his tranq rifle with him and shot Mr. Terrell yet again due to the panic he was in. He was not charged for anything, as it was a rather understandable reaction. After the holding cell, Mr. Terrell was later transferred directly to our mental facility and is currently locked in a room just down the hall. The process of getting him in here was a little scuffed, but we made it happen. We had to. He is without a doubt the most dangerous patient I've ever seen, but also the most fascinating. We feed him exclusively pork, as he spits out anything else we give him. I find it rather interesting that Mr. Terrell called the tranq rifles metal poles and the truck a metal carriage. Without a doubt, he knows what guns and trucks are. He seems to feign ignorance about many things. For instance, not knowing how much time has passed. There's a clock in his room. This shows how far his delusion goes. He has convinced himself that he knows nothing about human technology. Why would he? He's a Wendigo. He also said that he had a foot injury from being hit with a rock. While he did have a hairline fracture, it was nothing major. We gave him a cast. He doesn't seem very fond of it. We do frequently remove Mr. Terrell from his room, but only so we can clean him. He won't do it himself, even though his room has a bathroom. Not to mention, we have to treat his infections and injuries. Living in a cave and eating people for a couple of months is not good for you. As for the sheet of paper he wrote on, I had it placed in his room today. Why? Sometimes, people write down exactly what's wrong with them. Terrell will stay locked up for the rest of his life and probably die still thinking he's a Wendigo. Nothing anyone has said or done can convince him otherwise. Myself, other doctors, and his friends and family. At least, the few friends and family still willing to see him. Terrell doesn't respond to anything we say. He's pretending not to understand us. We have come to the end of the story of Ned Terrell. Well, maybe not quite. He's already turned into an urban legend, and someday, someone will probably make one of those serial killer documentaries about him, and after that a horror movie that'll say based on true events. It'll probably be called The Canadian Cannibal, or something equally as tasteless. Another thing, Terrell is not entirely unique. Wendigo psychosis, a condition which causes humans to resort to cannibalism, has been observed before. To my knowledge, however, no case of it has ever been officially studied. I believe Terrell will be the first, although we should probably rename the ailment to Terrell's disorder or something along those lines. He is simply an insane man, that is all. Certainly not possessed by an evil spirit of any kind. I mean, come on. Wendigos. There's no such thing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must shut my windows. The temperature just took an absolute dive. It's rather chilly now. I think there's a blizzard coming in. Fourth story. The Mimic in the Woods. I moved into the house 2 weeks ago, charmed by its rustic appeal and the sprawling woods behind it. Locals warned me about those woods, said they were haunted. I laughed it off. Ghost stories are for kids, and I wasn't about to let superstitions ruin my love for hiking. That evening, I decided to explore. My German shepherd, Max, was antsy, his leash taut as he paced the living room. He was eager to run, so I grabbed a flashlight and headed out just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The woods were eerily quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of my boots on the trail and the occasional jingle of Max's collar. About 10 minutes in, I heard it. "Max, come here." The voice stopped me in my tracks. It was my voice, unmistakable, echoing faintly ahead. But I hadn't said a word. Max growled, low and guttural, his hackles raised. "Hello." I called out, shining my flashlight into the trees. "Hello." The response was immediate, but it wasn't quite right. It was my voice, but distorted, hollow, like someone was playing it through a broken speaker. My chest tightened. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was some kind of weird echo. But Max's growls turned into frantic barking, and I couldn't shake the prickling sensation creeping up my neck. Then it spoke again. "Help me." It was my voice, desperate and pleading, coming from deeper in the woods. I froze. Every rational part of me screamed to turn back, to run, but the sound tugged at me. What if someone really needed help? "Stay here," I whispered to Max, but he tugged against his leash, whining like he understood what I was about to do. I pushed forward. My flashlight's beam shook as I swept it through the trees, following the sound. The woods opened into a clearing, and that's when I saw it. It was me. No, not me. It looked like me. Same jacket, same jeans, but its movements were wrong, too rigid like a puppet on strings. Its head jerked up, and its face split into a grin too wide to be human. "Help me," it said again. The words came out flat, disconnected from the movement of its lips. My stomach churned, and Max barked like mad, the leash slipping from my grasp. He lunged at the thing, but it didn't react. Instead, it tilted its head, studying me. "Who are you?" I croaked. "Who are you?" It repeated in the same tone, but its voice was changing, warping into something guttural and inhuman. The thing dropped to all fours with a sickening crack of its joints, and my blood turned to ice. It began to crawl toward me, its limbs too long and its eyes glinting in the faint light of my flashlight. "Stay," it rasped, its voice nothing like mine now. "Claire, stay." I bolted. I didn't care where I was going, as long as it was away. Max raced ahead of me, barking furiously. Branches whipped at my face, my lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I burst out of the trees and onto my back porch. I slammed the door shut and locked it, collapsing against it as Max barked at the window. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. I glanced outside, but the woods were still. Too still. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind made my heart race. The next morning I saw it. A muddy handprint smeared across my bedroom window. It wasn't mine. It was far too large, the fingers impossibly long. And just as I was trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, I heard it again. "Claire, let me in." It was my voice. Fifth story. Wendigo. I never thought it would be the last time I saw my little sister. It started out as such a typical Friday afternoon. The bell rung, and we had the whole weekend to look forward to. We lived in a small town in Michigan. It was one of those towns where everyone knew everyone. One of those towns where you basically felt safe anywhere you went. We lived in a small split-level house. My little sister and I shared a bedroom, and my parents were directly across the hall from us. Our house backed onto a deep, vast forest, and through the middle of the forest was a river. The woods always provided a sort of natural playground for the local kids, building tree forts, playing hide-and-go-seek, and swimming the more shallow parts of the river. My little sister and I felt especially lucky. The woods were essentially my backyard, and we really felt like they were ours. Our parents were fine with us playing in the woods. They just had one rule: don't cross to the other side of the river. The woods on our side of the river were quite well traveled by all the locals. By age 7, you knew them like the back of your hand. The other side of the river, however, was much less traveled. It was our town's myth, kind of our own scary claim to fame. The Mi'kmaq tribe had largely settled the area around our town, so there were a lot of stories based on Native American culture. Everyone's favorite story was about the Wendigo. A Wendigo is a Native American legend, supposedly a half-man, half-beast type creature. The rumor is that during a harsh Michigan winter, a member of the Mi'kmaq tribe and his hunting partner got caught during a blizzard. The tribe member's partner died, and with no food, the tribe member was forced to eat him. Native Americans believe that Wendigos are born when a member of their tribe is forced to resort to cannibalism due to harsh conditions, such as weather or a famine. And so, legend was born, and people began to believe that a Wendigo hunted for more flesh in our woods. Everyone from here has a story that they would be having a campfire in the woods, and all of a sudden a deep resonating roar would sound out through the forest. The belief around here was that the Wendigo would not hunt for you. So long as you stayed on our side of the river, the rest of the woods beyond the river belonged to him. As per usual Friday ritual, my friends and I filled our backpacks with our swim trunks, snacks, soda, and other trinkets to spend the rest of the day playing in the woods. As we were leaving, my little sister came running out of the house. I was 13 and she was 9. She was begging me to come spend the day in the woods with my friends and I. Normally, I would say no, but it was such a beautiful day and she really was not much of a hassle to have along, so I said yes. There were 4 of us, including my little sister and I. It was 3 in the afternoon at the beginning of June, so we knew we would have daylight for quite a while. Off we went into the woods, taking the same trail that we took every time. The trail led us straight to the river, where we would set up a little camp and spend the rest of the day playing and swimming. A few hours rolled by, and we were pretty tired. There was not much left to do, so I suggested that we pack up and head home. Now, 13 could be quite a rebellious age, the age where you start to disobey your parents, maybe act out in school here and there, try a cigarette, pretty typical teenage behavior. "Let's cross to the other side of the river," one of my friends exclaimed. In my head, I knew this was a terrible idea. Growing up here, you barely have any rules to follow. Not going to the other side of the river was an explicit one. However, "Yeah, I've always wanted to do that," my other friend said in agreement. In my head, I knew this was a bad idea, but I also did not want to seem like a chicken in front of my friends. "Well, okay," I said cautiously. My little sister looked at me. Her big blue eyes were full of fear. I reassured her, telling her that nothing bad would happen. And so, we began to walk to the point in the river where it was shallow enough to walk across. We arrived, and I will be honest, the other side of the river looked like an entirely different world. It was darker. It honestly just had this entire unfriendly vibe to it. I brushed it off that it was all in my head. It was about 7:30 p.m., and the sun was beginning to set in the sky, though we still had plenty of daylight. We walked across the river. It was about ankle deep at this point, and the water was frigid here, a lot colder than it was where we were swimming. I put my foot down on the other side of the river. For the first time in my entire life, I had done what so many people who grew up here fear to do. Just standing there felt uneasy. It really felt like we did not belong there. But at the same time, there was that feeling of adrenaline pumping through my body, and it carried me as we began walking deeper into the woods. My little sister was attached to my hip. I felt bad. She truly had no interest in being here, but also wanted to appear brave in front of my friends. As we got deeper into the woods, the feeling of dread increased. The weird part is, it was not what I could hear. It's what I could not hear. There was not a sound, not a cricket, not a bird, not even the river. It was silent, deadly silent. The trees seemed so much thicker in this part of the woods. Not as much sunlight came through, so it was definitely darker, not just my imagination. Crack we heard in the distance. Everyone gasped. I cannot reiterate enough that it was silent. There was not a single noise coming from anywhere, but then to hear that distinct crack, it made my heart skip a beat. Probably just a deer. There's tons of them in the woods. One of my friends stated. At this point, I wanted to turn back, but for some reason we just kept going. The stories were echoing through my head about the Wendigo, about how foolish people over the years had dared to cross over to this side of the river, and how they were never seen again. As we continued to explore the uncharted part of the woods, another crack this time came from behind us. That one really startled everyone. We had all decided that it was time to head back. It was really starting to get dark. There was just one problem. This side of the woods was unfamiliar to us, and we were lost. My little sister began to cry upon realizing this, and while I was doing my best to settle her down, she was really scared, and I have to admit that I was too. The minimal light that was previously coming down from between the thick trees was now beginning to fade as the sun began to set. The darkness was becoming even darker, and we had not even thought to bring flashlights. The thought of Wendigo ran through my head time and time again, each time sending a sickening chill down my spine. We tried everything we could to find our way back to the shallow spot of the river, but it was to no avail. We could not even find the river to begin with. Crack we heard again from behind us. Then a low rumble, a rumble that resonated through the trees. Whoosh, a gust of wind hit us from the side, knocking me back and knocking my little sister over. The rumble got louder, growing into more of a roar. "It's a bear," screamed one of my friends. Whoosh, another gust of wind hit us, this time from behind. Crack. Whoosh, this time it hit us in the front, knocking all of us over. "Run!" I bellowed, and we all ran, leaving our backpacks behind. I had my little sister's hand in mine, essentially dragging her through the dirt and leaves on the ground of the forest. I could definitely hear something running. Fast footsteps. They would be behind us, then beside us, then gone. "It's the river!" screamed one of my friends. We all stopped as we approached the river's edge. It was too dark to tell if it was shallow or deep at this point. The roar returned, this time coming from behind us, and it was close. "We have to jump in," I said. "No," my two friends and my little sister screamed simultaneously. Fast footsteps approached, a low growl, and multiple cracks as the predator approached us. "Now!" I screamed, and then we jumped. The last thing I heard before my head sunk under the water was a roar. Inhuman, and nothing like an animal could produce. I knew what had just chased us, and I know how good of a hunter it is. My question to myself was why, and how are we still alive? The water was pitch black, and it was deep. We were all strong swimmers, and managed to find our way to the other side of the river, our side of the river. Even in the dark, we were able to navigate this side of the river and find our way back to the trail that led to my house. The whole walk back, all I could think about how was if Wendigo wanted us dead, we would be dead. Every legend about it speaks about how it is the best hunter and how once it tracks you, you are dead. We arrived back at my house to some very angry parents scolding us. We all explained how we had just lost track of time, having too much fun playing in the woods. They bought all of our explanations. No way were we going to mention the fact that we went exactly where we had been told not to go our entire lives. I prepared myself for bed and went to lie down in my bed. It was hot this time of year, so my window was open. It was letting in a gentle breeze that felt quite nice, so I decided to just leave it open. As I lie there, I hear the sound of the quick footsteps again, accompanied by the low rumbling. My palms began to sweat, my heart dropped into my stomach. Had Wendigo tracked us back to our house? As slowly as possible, I turned the lever and closed my window, doing my best not to make sound. My little sister was asleep on the bed parallel to mine. I did not want her to hear any of this. I shut the window and flipped the latch to lock it. My parents were asleep. My little sister was asleep. I was the only one awake for this. I lay under my covers, noticing every little sound my old house made. And then I heard it. The kitchen door was opening. It makes a distinct squeak when it opens. I began to shake. Wendigo had come. I could hear it moving about our basement, knocking a glass over opening cupboards. The sound of fast footsteps below me. The fast footsteps became louder as Wendigo made its way up our staircase and to my bedroom door. The knob turned, and Wendigo was inside my bedroom. I shook violently, my hands clammy, my stomach sick. I hid under my covers as I listened to the low rumble grow louder and louder with each footstep it took in my room. And then whoosh, the same sound it had made as it hunted us in the woods. The rumbling had stopped, and the fast footsteps were gone. Wendigo, too, was gone as I emerged from under my covers. But where did it go? The sun shined brightly into my room the next morning, and I hopped out of bed. I went downstairs to find my parents sitting in the kitchen, my dad reading the newspaper and drinking coffee, my mom frying bacon for breakfast. "Morning, champ. You must have slept well after your big day yesterday," my dad said. He was right. It was 11 a.m., and I rarely sleep past 9:30. "The same for your sister," my mom said. "Why don't you go wake her up, champ?" my dad said. I immediately ran upstairs to our room, and to this day, it is still the most horrific sight that I have ever laid eyes upon. My little sister's bed was empty. "Mom. Dad, come quick," I cried out. They both ran upstairs. "Oh my God, where is she?" my mom said. She was already beginning to cry. We looked everywhere. She was not in the house. My parents looked outside, and within an hour, a search party had formed. They searched the woods top to bottom, but she was nowhere to be found. My parents believed that she had wandered off to the woods in the morning, fell in the lake, and drowned. But I knew why they could not find her. I knew why they would never find her. They were looking in the wrong side of the woods. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.